I've tried to be calm, cool, and collected when it comes to the sheer volume of junk being said about real estate agents over the last couple of months, because I have spent almost 24 years as a full-time realtor doing everything I can to help my neighbors in real estate. And I'm so tired of this garbage on the internet that's trashing us, acting like realtors are the top 1%ers making bazillions of dollars. Let me give y'all a little fact you need to know. First of all, the average realtor is a woman. The average realtor is in their second career. The average realtor makes $44,813 a year. That's poverty line money, y'all. Now let's talk about this for a second. The question becomes, why is the current DOJ so determined to stomp on female entrepreneurs that are barely at the poverty line? And what they're doing, by the way, in their day-to-day jobs is trying to help people navigate a really big and possibly messy transaction with the most money they'll ever spend in their lives. And we don't even know what they're going to encounter when they start working with us. And meanwhile, the narrative is that we're a bunch of greedy crooks. I'm so tired of it, because I have seen so many agents in my life who have gone to the person's house to help them pack up because the grandkids didn't show up. They have helped cover the cost of the painter and then gotten reimbursed later. They have gone above and beyond. They have you cry on their shoulders. They've taken them out to supper. I know one agent right now who let a client move in with her because they had nowhere to go. But that's who agents are. They are not what you see on Selling Sunset. Y'all, that is television. That is not real life. HGTV is not real life. If you're watching that show, House Hunters, where in 30 minutes they look at 3 houses with their agent, a spoiler alert, it don't work that way. Nobody's client looks at 3 houses in 30 minutes and buys the middle one, even though they never acted like they wanted it. And also, every house has to talk about inspections and surveys and appraisals. I have yet to see a House Hunter episode that gets hung up over fungal growth. So when you start realizing all of the things that go on and all of the emotion that happens, you start to realize that the main reason realtors should not be stomped on is that we are one of those professions that has the unique job opportunity of absorbing somebody else's emotions. If you talk to anybody who's been in real estate more than 5 minutes, they have had a client who called and cussed them up and down the country. And the agent said, "Oh my, I hear you. I'm so sorry, and listened and let them get it off their chest. And then that angry person hung up the phone, and 9 times out of 10 calls back and said, "I'm really sorry I unloaded on you." What'd the agent say? It's all right, because we understand in our profession that real estate is unique. It is not a commodity. So for every article that wants to talk about real estate being bought and sold on websites, understand this: the house where you live, where your babies lay their little heads down to sleep at night, and where mama had her last Thanksgiving, that is not a commodity. It is a big giant purchase, yes, it's tangible, yes, but it is not a commodity. If it were a commodity, you wouldn't walk inside and let your eyes start to sparkling because you saw the exact kitchen bar you were always dreaming of. And we, as your agents, we know this is not a commodity. We get that it is an emotional purchase, which is why so many agents who are successful do happen to be women, because like it or hate it, women tend to be a little more emotionally tuned in than most men. And they really enjoy being that servant leader for their clients. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to be successful. There are a lot of successful agents, and they've done great things in their community, because every successful agent I know is out there giving back. They are sponsoring little league teams and working for the battered women's shelter. They are rolling their sleeves up for Habitat for Humanity, and they do it all without you even knowing, because realtors just have a giving heart. And you're just not going to see that, y'all, on HGTV or Bravo, because it's just not going to be considered compelling reality TV. Well, the reality of real estate is that every single day there is somebody out there who's tired of the corporate world. They don't want to work for somebody else for 40 hours a week and make $80,000. They'd actually rather work 100 hours a week and make 44, because they really enjoy what they do. All that to be said, why in the world are so many people piling on real estate? It's a little shocking, isn't it? Especially if you knew this fact. The fact is, real estate and what happens in this space is the 5th biggest piece of American GDP. Did you realize that? You thought it was just a house being sold down the street, but every time a house is bought or sold, or a commercial property or a parcel of land, there are also a ton of ancillary businesses that are involved. You've got your home inspector crowd. You've got your appraiser crowd. The certified appraisers are critical to the process. You've got land surveyors. You're going to also have the closing attorneys and the title insurance companies. And you've got the homeowners insurance and the places where we can still get insurance. That's a hot topic for a different day. And you're going to have the escrow officers. You're going to have loan officers. You're going to have closers and processors for the loan officers. And you're going to now be thinking about what happens when they do get in that lovely house. They'll call a locksmith to change the locks. It's just a good idea. They're going to set up security. They're going to call Ring or Arlo or go to CPI. They're going to spend that money. Then they're going to spend the turn-on fees to the local utilities. Also a topic for a different day. They are going to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and Home Goods and Hobby Lobby and every other store on the planet that sells important things or kitschy things to make it their own, thereby proving what happens when a piece of real estate is transacted. It puts an average of $92,000 into the local economy. It is so important. So the question you have to ask yourself is, okay, Leigh, that's all pretty important stuff. Why are realtors getting stomped on? I'd like to know, because I can tell you this, what you're hearing around the verdicts on these class action lawsuits is not necessarily the real reality of the real estate agent where you live. I know the agents where I live. I am a good agent, and there are other really good agents here. There are some that could be better. I don't fault them for that, and I don't say that real estate is any kind of a level playing field, because we have those who strive to be excellent, and we have those who just aren't dialed into it. Well, that's the beauty, because as a consumer, that means you can pick either one. You can pick any price point you want in the spectrum, because you're going to, frankly, get what you pay for in a lot of instances. But in addition to thinking about why in the world it is that the DOJ wants to stomp on real estate when we're doing so much good in the American economy and for all these other small businesses all around us, well, let's just take that over to the angle that's being put forth in these articles. And if y'all think I'm rambling today, you're right, because I've had enough of these headlines. There was an article talking about, and I get lots and lots of articles about real estate. This one is in the Washington Examiner, talking about the human cost of real estate being expensive. And it goes on to ramble about how soaring mortgage rates combined with how high housing prices have pushed home buying out of reach for many people. I just want y'all to know that for the last several years, the media have been engaged in a general message that says homeownership is dead and everybody should rent. Well, now suddenly it's become, well, golly gee willikers, they'd like to buy. Really? Is that really the case? Pick a lane, y'all. I will say this about realtors. We pick our lane, and we've been very firmly in it that we support home ownership for lots and lots of reasons. Now, is it for everyone? No. But should the path be open to everyone? Absolutely, because some people just change their minds later in life. Like this young person who was interviewed for this article, who was talking about how he sees buying a home as a good investment for the long term. I can absolutely tell you that. One of the things that realtors do that is an unsung example of how important they are is help people see further down the road than they can. We used to have people in their houses in the Charlotte market an average of 4 years. Now they're in those homes an average of 10 years. When you think about that, you really do need a professional guiding you before you spend that much money on somewhere you're going to be for a decade or more. So that is generally a good investment. Now, there's no guarantee that prices go up over time, but I can look back at the first property I bought and had a contract on back in the 90s, and I sure wish that I had had the wherewithal to divvy up my deposit and buy more than one property when I could have. I think most of us do. If there's one conversation I've had at the gas station more than others, I'll talk to people everywhere, and I will find lots of people and I'll ask them, do you wish you'd have bought real estate earlier? And every single one of them says yes, y'all. In fact, if you look back at the Great Recession between 07 and about 13, the one regret most people have is that they did not buy a whole bunch of real estate then. And why didn't they? Well, we're humans and we have a hard time seeing a long-term play here. We see short-term, which is part of why I want you to think very thoughtfully about these lawsuits and these outcomes, because they're very short-term focused. What people are forgetting is that the chaos being caused in the markets is going to have a long-term ramification on neighbors that have never, ever been engaged before. You want to know the neighbor that's going to get impacted the most right now because of an inability to see unintended consequences and long-term reactions? That's our veterans, y'all. Because if you did not know it, the VA home loan program is the one thing the VA administration has gotten right for our veterans. It's become more efficient over the years. It is a zero down program. It makes home buying possible for many of our veterans who have served us so faithfully in the armed services. However, in the VA loan program, there's a rule that says veterans can't pay their own agent. If you are buying a house, they cannot be compensated by the veteran. The VA will tell you this is to protect veterans from paying fees they shouldn't have to pay. Well, that sounds good on paper until you realize that in the current real estate market, which is entering a state of flux and chaos, there are some sellers who do not want to pay a buyer agent for a buyer. That's the seller's choice. However, the veteran is not allowed by the VA guidelines to compensate their own agent, which means that that seller is either going to have to change their mind and be willing to compensate the veteran's agent, or the veteran will have to give up having their own agent and go directly to the listing agent, which I don't think is the best outcome, y'all. That means that the veteran will have to go it alone. Or the veteran can enter a dual agency agreement where one agent is working for both parties, and let's be honest, there is an inherent conflict of interest there. Or the veteran can get an agent to work for free. And sadly, I have seen news articles that say those agents should just work for free. That's a crock of baloney. Nobody should be asked to be a professional for free. Now, if the agent chooses to do a pro bono case every now and then, that is, of course, their choice as an independent contractor. But the fact that the media are saying that agents should be willing to work for free is absolutely asinine. There is no other profession on the planet currently being asked to work for free, just realtors. There's a problem there, y'all. And it comes back to what the public thinks about what we do, who we are, and how we're portrayed. Now, let's carry on in this article very briefly, because this person said that paying his monthly payment for what he wants is too much. And then it says, oh, golly gee willikers, people aren't getting as much house as they want. All right, do I really have to be the old lady on the lawn who says this? Maybe your house isn't going to be what you want when you buy it. There, I said it. Maybe you should move in and personalize it. My first house had popcorn ceilings and some really tired carpet. It had plywood cabinets, and the countertops were a laminate that was peeling off at the edges. And if you've had them, you know what I'm talking about, because it will catch on your skirt as you walk by. So you got to put some hot glue on it and maybe get your hair dryer out to get it to lay flat again. And you know what? I didn't care that my house was not perfect. It wasn't everything that I wanted, but it was mine. And so what did I do over time? Changed out the cupboards. I had to save up to do that. Changed out the countertops. Had to save up to do that. I changed out the flooring. I had to save up to do that because I was raised that if I wanted something, I should save up and then get it done. That could be perhaps a great learning lesson of the real estate market that we're in now. There should be some honor in saving up to do something. And maybe, just maybe, you start off with something that is not perfect. Frankly, I think about my first apartment. My first apartment was interesting, to say the least, because I was in college at the time. And college apartments, when I was in those days, in the early 90s, was not the same apartments there are now, which have floor-to-ceiling glass and granite countertops and hardwood floors. We lived in some pretty rough college apartments, and we were fine. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I don't need perfection. I just need to get things going. So this same article, after we have to hear about people don't get exactly what they want, the shock of it, carries on to say that part of the problem with inventory is all these greedy people who are staying in their houses with their low interest rates. All right, look, for years, I can show you posts all the way back to when Facebook and Instagram really were getting started. There have been crazy low interest rates. From 2008 to 2022, we had the phrase that I made fun of for a long time as an instructor, frankly, historically low interest rates. I would say that was free money. We had free money for years, and your realtors have said for a long time that you should go ahead and buy while rates were low. For all the people who didn't, Whose fault is that? I'm so sorry that you didn't take advantage of it, but for heaven's sakes, there were realtors everywhere that were willing to walk you through how. And that shouldn't be the fault of the person who took advantage of it when it was available. I don't fault the people who bought houses during the Great Recession. I certainly don't fault the investors who took advantage of the opportunity to help bring houses back up and make them into good rental opportunities. I don't fault the people who have low credit, but I do fault them if they don't do the work to bring the credit score back. Because y'all, we have to get to a point where there's some level of personal responsibility here. And it is not the real estate agent's fault that real estate's gotten expensive. What has happened is we have an imbalance of supply and demand. A lot of y'all need to go back to economics classes and get some real basic grasp of supply and demand, and frankly that includes most of our bureaucrats and elected officials, because the latest policy proposal from the administration is to give more money to first-time buyers. All right, great. I love first-time buyers, but what you're doing is you're adding to demand. We already have an imbalance where we have too much demand, and you've added more to it. What you need to do, if you're going to have a smart policy proposal, add to supply. Take that same money and make a benefit to our developers who can build workforce housing. Figure out how we can get these municipalities and local levels to take out some of these permitting fees and these overlays that are causing the cost of housing to go up. Because spoiler alert, it's not my commission as a real estate agent that's made housing unaffordable. You want to point a finger? Point it at a lot of the cities and counties and the overreach on zoning and regulations that have caused the developers to have to continually jack their prices up. Yes, that is true. It is not my fault. It is somebody else's fault, and that somebody else is not one person. There are a lot of bodies at play here, and friends, that's where you got to follow the money and pay attention to every one of these pieces as you're looking at what's happening in the housing market. So I'll tell you one more thing as I continue to ramble here about how we get out of this housing crisis. If you want to make some policy changes, the first one is allow veterans to pay their own agents' commissions if that's what they want to do. Give them the same free market options that the rest of us have. Make sure that if we're going to get the supply and demand in line, we figure out how to provide tax credits or incentives to developers and builders, and talk to our local officials about how they can get out of the way of housing in a way that is smart for an area. Because by the way, growth looks different for every area of the country. No one county has the perfect solution. Each one has a different agricultural base, business base, and housing base, and should be making really smart responses in all those things. And the third policy proposal I would make is to stay out of the mortgage markets. We have so much interference right now by the Fed with this interest rates up and down, up and down. That's not solving the problem. If you want to know why interest rates are so uncertain, it has to do with inflation. We need inflation to come down. For inflation to come down, the government has to stop printing money, also known as QE. Every time they print money, the value of our dollar goes down and inflation goes up. So yes, it might be time for all of us to tighten our belts a little bit and make better decisions so that we can have a better future. Because I know better futures are possible. My future's better because of real estate. I hope that yours will be too. Now, if any of these don't make sense to you, you want me to dive a little deeper, you let me know, because if you stayed with me this whole time, high five, friend, high five, because this was definitely a hot take Thursday, and it is time for all of us to get a little more educated and a little more outspoken so that we can protect the American dream.